Hello, you're listening to the K12 Tech Podcast, bringing you insights in the world of education technology. Stay tuned as we discuss the past, the present, and most importantly, the future of technology in our schools. Hello, and thank you for joining us today on our K12 Tech Podcast. My name is Sean. We're also joined with Mike from K12 Tech, and then we are with Leo and Oliver from NutKase Accessories. Very excited to have them on today, both very good in the business world of education technology. We're going to hear a little bit about their backstory, how they got to where they are today, where they started from, and if anyone out there has ideas, how to make those ideas turn into reality. So I'm going to give it over to Oliver and Leo here for a minute, and they're going to introduce themselves, give us a little background, and we'll go from there.
Thanks so much for having us, Sean and Mike. It's great to be here. I think I might jump in first. My name's Leo Shortland. I'm Australian. I'm the COO here at NutKase Accessories, managing our European distribution and sales channel, as well as worldwide logistics and contract manufacturing. And really excited to talk about EdTech. We've been pretty deep in EdTech from day one. We really like talking about products and bringing product ideas to life. So looking forward to this conversation.
My name is Oliver Page. I'm one of the founders here at NutKase as well. And right now I'm wearing the hat as VP of Sales. And I'm excited to be on the podcast. I appreciate being invited. And ready to dive in.
Well, I know we're excited to have you guys. Now, if I heard correctly, Oliver, this kind of all started back when you were in high school at the age of 17?
That's correct. I grew up in Italy. I was lucky enough to have great parents who immigrated to Italy from the United States. And so I grew up going to American schools in Rome. And when I was 17, I was a huge Apple nerd, a huge Apple fan. And the iPad 1 came out. I wanted to get one as quickly as possible. They weren't for sale in Italy at the time. And so we had a friend ship one from the States, but they forgot to send the case with the iPad. And so I was using like a neoprene sleeve at school that was protecting it, but I didn't have a kickstand. It didn't have any utility. It was clunky, slippery. And that kind of got me thinking about designing a prototype for a case that had a hand strap. And when I was 17, I came to design, found a factory in China, got a prototype made, and ultimately had the support of my parents to buy 500 units, which I started selling to friends and family. I made a small little e-commerce store, which didn't really go anywhere, but the education component to the business really came in the early days, because my elementary school bought 100 iPads and needed 100 cases, and they were our first big K12 customer, our only customer really. And that's how we got started with K12. And we're just like, you know what? The case is designed by a student. It's for students. That has a nice ring to it. Let's start selling to schools. And that's how we got started.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, so as far as that goes, I mean, even were there issues with you being, under 18 and trying to start all that? Like, necessarily you're not technically an adult yet, or was it difficult finding a factory that produces things like that, since you kind of, from what it sounds like, if that was with the first generation of iPads, this was kind of a new product on the market, especially over there where they weren't even available yet. Were there hurdles that you encountered as far as, just getting the cases made themselves?
Absolutely. Making anything in China, big or small, is always tough. It's especially when you're 17, especially when you have no experience, limited funding, and you've never been to China and you don't speak Chinese, and you're just communicating with random factories on Alibaba's subpar messaging app. So a lot of hurdles, there's no doubt. But at the same time, you speak to any successful entrepreneur, no one ever gets it right the first time around. And so we definitely made a lot of mistakes, and there were a lot of situations where we thought we were going to have to throw the towel in. But ultimately, we were able to find a reliable factory, which was a miracle. It was just lucky. We just got lucky. That's the reality. But the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? I mean, that's, also part of the equation too. So, in the early days, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of bad products, a lot of a lot of bad prototypes, but we kind of just
What
got
happened with
lucky
the
and found
quality
right
control, Ollie? What happened with the quality control on one of those early iterations?
Right. That brings up another horror story where ultimately we ended up buying about 500 of our first generation case. We thought they were all going to be made out of like a high quality polycarbonate synthetic fabric, but they all turned out to be made out of recycled Chinese toothpaste boxes, which was a shocker to say the least. So, we've come a long way since the Chinese toothpaste box days. That's for sure.
So did they send you paper cases, or were they still plastic of some sort?
They were made, like the interior was made out of like toothpaste boxes. And like one day I was like peering through one of the seams and I saw like a shiny tooth in like a seam of the product. And like I tore it open and there was just like toothbrushes and teeth everywhere. It was just, So
I believe it started
not
out
ideal.
with a hard plastic lining with a leather overstitch, and ended up to be on the hard plastic was just flat toothpaste boxes that were flattened, glued together to make sort of like a mega.
Yeah, I mean,
Lessons
and
learned.
quality control is so important, everywhere. And when you're new to something too, that may not be something that's just on the front of your mind when you're excited about getting your product in. You just made something new, and then it turns out someone else didn't care as much as you did, and that's gotta hurt. So Leo,
Yeah.
how did you get involved with Oliver then?
So I have an easy advantage that Oliver's my cousin and is far more entrepreneurial minded than I am. Sort of while he was doing this, I was working in international schools around Asia and Europe, teaching English and then teaching a few other subjects as well. Mid to late 2016, when sort of NutKase was starting to get bigger, K12 tech deployments really increased in Europe as well. We had some sort of preliminary conversations about how we could scale and grow out NutKase. At the time, I was working on a separate business, which was one of the world's worst business ideas of all time. But I loved wine and I loved natural wines, which is a style of winemaking. And I was working in Australia at the time, and we noticed that there was a big gap in the market, that there wasn't enough, supply of natural wines. And so I had the idea with a buddy of mine that the country of Georgia, near Russia, has been making natural wines for about 7,000 years. And we had some contacts there. We found a great winery, and we made a business plan. We were going to import wines from Georgia into Australia to sell them in some networks of wine distributors. We made a great business plan. The wine cost about $1.50 a bottle. It would probably cost us $1 to ship, and we'd sell them for $10 to $12 each. The problem we had is logistically, it's not easy to transport something that has to be temperature controlled from the Caucasus to Australia. And our quote for shipping the wine came in at $33 per bottle, not the $1 that we projected in our aggressive business plan. The other thing that was a complication is that there's only so many import licenses for wine Australia gives out every year. And there was a 3-year delay when we tried to apply in January. So that idea kind of came and fell very quickly. We eventually ended up with a pallet of wine months and months and all sorts of hurdles later. But I'd always been into sales and into education. And so we were talking to Oliver about how we can, the potential demand to grow NutKase. And so early 2017, I came aboard, moved to Italy to run our sort of European sales and distribution. And we raised some money from an investor. And we really got focused on trying to turn sort of Oliver's small student startup idea into a big business and to see how far we could run with it. We thought we had a good product at that time, toothpaste box free. And so, I got involved in that capacity. And thankfully, NutKase has grown every year since then pretty rapidly. We have a much bigger team than we do now. And it's been a heck of a journey, a really fun ride so far, with plenty of other problems over the years, unfortunately. But nothing quite toothpaste box related.
So what are those, I guess, smaller than toothpaste box problems that you guys have encountered since the company has grown? Because I know now you have, way more than one product for different devices. So I'm sure branching out and growing the company is going to have its own growing pains. But what are some of those pains that you guys encountered?
So firstly, we diversified. We originally were really focused on iPad cases. iPad in education was very, very dominant in Europe for a long time, especially among international schools. And so we only really needed one product to meet that demand. From then, especially when we rolled out into the US market in mid-2017, Chromebooks and laptop form factor devices were far more popular. And so we had to design cases that would fit within the school's budget, be drop proof, be resilient enough to support a 10-year warranty, which we offer. And that was definitely a challenging sort of design concept. And we've run through multiple iterations to get to the product line that we're very comfortable with now. But definitely it was a heck of a learning lesson, because we went from iPad cases that were mostly injection molded, which required not much manual labor to make, to our range of cases at the moment that are all stitch and sew. So the fabric's cut, it's sewn, you have to double check handles, zippers, all sorts of extra quality control breakpoints that you have to, be aware of and be ready for. And unfortunately, Oliver has a great expression where he says, NutKase is a 10-year overnight success, because, it's taken us a long time to get where we are. And we've had a lot of bad products and things that we've had to kind of improve along the way. Notwithstanding everything in the past 2 years with regards to supply chain delays, shipping delays, COVID complications, school budgets going super wonky out of nowhere. And also, I think the EdTech business is quite a challenging business to be in already, because you have a very seasonal business with really one quarter being the vast majority of your sales. And so you have to be pretty tight on the business and sort of finance side to be able to plan, project, and be ready for these peak seasons. Yeah, I
think the other, I guess, what I guess would assume to be a pretty large hurdle for that too is, right now we have schools that are requesting models of devices that we physically haven't even seen yet. So in order to prepare for, let's say, the newest model of device that's coming out, do they send you guys prototypes? Do you have to find the designs online and kind of hope that your initial prototype fits? How do you prepare for, because it changes every year, right? There's always a new model. So how do you kind of get ready for that model to come out?
We don't have a good solution. Apple, unfortunately, doesn't share designs with us. I don't think there's many people they do share designs with. So typically we have to wait until release date. We buy the iPad and then we make a case for it just like that. Some big competitors in our space have been totally burned in the past for following predictions, or there's always rumors going around about this one's going to be 12 inches, this one's going to be 10 inches. I won't name names, but a pretty prominent company took a really big position before Apple released an iPhone model, and they turned out to get the size totally wrong. Everyone thought Apple was going to change the size of the iPhone, so they loaded up with 20,000 cases to be ready, and it turned out none of the cases fit, and it's a straight total loss. We're lucky that we have a pretty quick turnaround time. We work closely with our contract manufacturers, so they'll get an iPad, we'll make a mold for in about 30 days and get a product available within 2 months of new product launch. But it's tough because also Apple doesn't give us a heads up, nor do anyone really give us a heads up about when they're releasing a new product. So when Apple had the iPad Air 2, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of these cases in stock ready to go. And then the next day, surprise Apple announcement, we've changed the size. It's now a 10.2 inch size. I'm still trying to sell some iPad Air 2 cases. So get to the ground if anyone's listening, but it's definitely challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. And even this, so not even size change, right? But like there's devices that one year they have rounded edges and the next year now they have, right angle edges. And clearly those cases aren't going to fit even though they're exact same size computers. So, it has to be difficult just to project or prepare for.
They changed the ports as well. They changed where the volume switch was. They swap it around and what was up is now off and all sorts of stuff. I think mostly just to spoil us humble case manufacturers' days, to be honest. But I'm sure there's another reason for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned, Leo, that you were looking to get into a different space before joining Oliver at NutKase. Oliver, do you have other ventures happening right now or in the past that you tried and had issues with? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think no, I would consider myself to be a somewhat of a serial entrepreneur in the sense. NutKase turned out to be my most successful venture. Greatly, I believe, in part due to having Leo on the team and just a really awesome team, because that was always missing, I think, in my other project. But I went through several iterations of my entrepreneurial journey, ranging from starting a mobility transportation startup in Italy called Scooterino, which was essentially like Uber but on motorcycles and mopeds. So you get picked up on a motorcycle and picked up and dropped off somewhere. Which, as you can imagine, for the Americans listening, that's probably not exactly the first choice of transport, especially in a busy city like Rome. But for the Italian population and for Romans, getting around on scooters and Vespas is like hopping in your car in America. So we had a pretty ambitious vision for building a transportation mobility startup. We raised about $1 million in funding. It was a really exciting and challenging experience. But ultimately, NutKase came out ahead, and that was where I decided to double down. And
tough for COVID as well, with like a shared
COVID was definitely kind of the final nail in the coffin for Scooterino, because no one was getting on the back of a motorcycle with a stranger during the pandemic. But I heard a definition. I heard a friend of mine that we were chatting with this morning gave us a really interesting definition of success, which was staying alive long enough to get lucky. And I think that really does speak a lot to entrepreneurial success, and I think all success in general, because I believe firmly in the harder you work, the luckier you get. But you also just have to be in the game long enough, and mature and grow and experience these battle wounds of building businesses for you to get your break. Rarely an entrepreneur gets their break on their first go around, kind of like we were talking about earlier with the manufacturing mishaps that we had. But yeah, I mean, I know Leo and I are committed to the long run together as partners and cousins and entrepreneurs. And it is a numbers game. You just got to put in the reps long enough and try and obviously be smart and make calculated risks as best as you can. But yeah, it's been an exciting journey, to say the least.
So speaking of numbers, you did say that you guys were able to raise a good amount of money for that Scooterino business. I've always been curious, but I've never asked how. I mean, obviously now there's crowdsource funding and things you can do online, but how do you go about raising money to be able to invest into a new business or new product? And then on the flip side of that, if that product fails, I mean, do you have to pay that money back? I mean, how does all that work? I've never understood that part of starting a business.
Raising money is one of the hardest things you can do. Without a doubt. I've had my fair share of experience doing it now over the past 10 years. And it doesn't seem to get any easier. But I mean, I think long story short is, depending on who you raise money from, there's different types of structures. People who put money in at the very early stages of a business will be called, let's say, angel investors. And these are people who, a good angel investor is investing in a lot of different projects and is kind of working under the assumption most of them, unfortunately, are going to fail, but hopefully one of them will do really well. And if they do really well, it'll pay off for all the losses in the other project. And that's kind of how the venture capital model works too, in kind of a weird way. It is a bit odd, but you look at some of the numbers on venture capital, it's like 1% of the investments in their portfolio return, a couple hundred X on their investment, which makes up for all the other bad investments they made. So, but this is kind of like a different direction that we're going in. And as far as investors are concerned, there's all types, all shapes and sizes. Leo, do you have any comments on the investment landscape?
Yeah, just in terms of like giving money back and things like that, I think typically, as Oliver said, it's how deals are structured. And so it depends on the potential return they stand to gain. If we approach a bank for financing for NutKase, they're going to want collateral, which basically, gives them security if things don't work out, and they do have a good chance to get their money back. The trade-off is, instead of getting a share of the business or a percent if we become 100 times bigger, they're just going to get a rate of interest on the actual money. Whereas if we say, hey, we've got a great idea for a business, we value it at $50,000, and if somebody makes a $10,000 investment, they're going to get 20% of the business. And so when the business becomes more valuable, they stand to make a really great exponential return. However, obviously, in exchange for having such a high potential upside, they have no security typically in the event that the business doesn't work out or it falls through. As far as actually how to reach people, it's been a great learning lesson because we've seen a lot of trends over the past 10 years from what investors are looking for. And investors have all sorts of different risk tolerance. That I think 10 years ago when Oliver started, especially trying to raise money, people were really bullish and really excited about high growth startups. And especially looking at Scooterino, companies like Uber and all these companies, nobody really cared about profitability. They just wanted to see how quickly businesses could grow and get massive, and then they kind of figure that out later. Now, in this economy we're in right now, if we're talking to investors, they're far more interested in bottom line, the profitability, the recurring revenue, everything like that. And it's just a matter of friends and family reaching out to different people that are in space and using your network to put a proposal and a business plan and a slide deck in front of them, and then kind of selling them on the vision, making them believe in people, process, products behind the business.
This sounds a lot like gambling to me.
Definitely. I think it's like if you play roulette, right? You can bet on black and red and be pretty 50-50 to win or lose your money, or you can bet on one number. And more often than not, you're going to lose, but if you win, you're going to get whatever it is, 35 times return. And I think different people have their own different risk tolerance. Some investors put most of their money in the stock market, and 5% go really speculative for all sorts of crazy ideas that are going to take over the world. They might, and they might become the next Facebook and become a billionaire from it. But more often than not, they're going to lose their money. And it just depends how they're structured and how much risk people want to take on.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely do like that analogy there about comparing it to gambling. So I guess the question I had, and this is kind of off the investment topic, this is more just again about being an entrepreneur. What would be probably the number one piece of advice that either of you have for anyone aspiring to start a business, especially in the ed tech world?
I think there's two lessons I've learned that have taken me far longer than they should have. And it's not specific to ed tech. One is focus. It's so easy when you're starting something to let other people dictate what you're going to do and split yourself. And even in ed tech, you might start by saying, I've got a great idea for a new type of desk for students, and I'm going to sell it to schools in my town. And then someone from the next state over reaches out and says, hey, can you do this but a little bit differently? Oh yeah, sure, of course I can. And they try and do that, and they try and do that, and they try and do too many things at once and do nothing great. And instead, really, what it took me a long time to learn is like the power of no, of like 95% of the things as an entrepreneur you should be saying no to. Not immediately, obviously you should consider them, but focus. And it's way better to crush one thing and be great at one thing than trying to do 50 different things. And we have this exact problem with NutKase. People ask us all the time about, hey, can you make a case for this device? Can you do this? Can you do this color? Can you change this thing? And too often it's easy to say yes because you want the sale, but then you end up bending over backwards. It distracts you from your core focus and just weakens you overall. I think the other thing specific to EdTech that we didn't do well for a long time that we've now learnt is if you want to work in EdTech, you have to be really switched on to school funding. Because business funding is one, businesses can always make decisions. When you sell to a business, there'll be one person that can tick a box more often than not. Schools, you really have to go a lot deeper to actually learn about budget timing, budget cycles, stakeholders, what an RFP is, how an RFP works. how can you best respond to these sort of RFPs, how to know at what point you might be going to RFP. And this is stuff that we didn't for a long time, and it really hurt us because we set ourselves up for sort of no success because we'd have products that maybe wouldn't win in an RFP, or we'd be trying to sell to schools the best possible case, but not be aware that their budget only gave them a much lower budget, and we wouldn't have something that could suit their needs either.
Gotcha. Definitely. I think, especially the budget, obviously we're in ed tech as well. And that's something that as I've started doing this more, I've definitely picked up. You really do have to be mindful with RFPs and just school budgeting in general. And I mean, kind of like you were saying, it's not through one person, it's through a school board and then the superintendent. And then, somebody else, the business office has to look at it. There's so many different hands in the pot with schools that you really have to be mindful of. And another thing, a lot of it, like you were saying, does come from government funding or state funding, however that works, but it also is taxpayer money. And that's something to kind of be mindful of as well. Is a lot of schools are very cautious on they spend their money because it is coming directly, usually from the parents of students at that school. So
it's always interesting when you're negotiating pricing with schools as well, because on one hand, it's not the person you're negotiating this money. So it's not like you're negotiating with a small business owner where it's literally money out of it. If they save $200, that's $200 in their pocket. But at the same time, the accountability and the justification, the people in schools, they have to really show that they've done their due diligence. And so you have to, I think, give a much better, value proposition for why your product's the best at the price point. It's not enough just to have the best product. You have to have the best product at the best price point. And what I mean by that, even with cases, is if a school's budget's $20 a case, you need to have the best possible product at that budget. If their budget's $25 a case, you need to have the best possible case at that budget, which I think is a little different compared to other industries where in some industries, if you work in healthcare and you can show that your product's better than something else they're already using, budget's almost secondary, because you can demonstrate that it is far superior. That doesn't necessarily happen in education. I mean, a laptop that's twice as fast isn't always going to be the choice that the school goes for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is perfect. And that's why you and a lot of other case manufacturers and even the device manufacturers have different tiers or levels of products, because the schools an incredibly budget oriented to where a case without a handle or a case with the handle that with the handle may cost $2 more puts them over budget because they're buying 1,000 of them. And it's something that the treasurers and the superintendents and everyone keeps that in mind when they're looking too. So yeah, I would say that's the price point is probably the number one biggest thing when negotiating with a school district.
Yeah, because it's tougher to show ROI as well. You could have a case that's twice as protective as a cheaper product. And so over a 3-year period, twice as protective case will save the school more money because they're going to lead to fewer broken devices. However, schools have annual budgets, and so they might not necessarily be able to split the budget over 3 years. They're just going to look at year by year what the best option is, and it can be tough to sort of show that the potential ROI with the more expensive product could actually save the money in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, the other thing I wanted to ask about was so we got how it started, how you kind of sourced the funding to get it going, where you had them made, the first sale that happened with your old, was it, I think, middle school or younger than that, with the cases. But how did you, especially starting overseas, how did the marketing and advertising and what did you guys have to go through to really spread now, I would say globally, with the products and growing the business as you have?
Conferences, trade shows, boots on the ground, cold introductions, walking up to resellers, and just putting in the hours and the reps. And that's how we did it. I landed in the States in 2018 as the only employee in the United States, and just started going to conferences. Had my sister come with me to a bunch of conferences, just repping the products, introducing myself to partners, and that's how we got started. I mean, every relationship that, in the early days, every relationship that we made was mostly at conferences and trade shows. And, at these events, they are I think they really are great opportunities for new brands to get exposure and to kind of like get that initial momentum. People are mostly, when you go to a trade show, everyone's open to chatting. That's why you're there. You're not there to ignore an email. You're not there to ignore someone who kind of walks up to you. It's hard to do that. So, yeah, for me, it was just going to conferences and trade shows, and then experimenting with different sorts of email marketing techniques. We were doing quite a bit of that as well in the early days. Still do a lot of email marketing, but the trade shows really moved the needle for us, just because we got that human interaction.
We're a physical
relatively
product
memorable.
brand.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
sell a physical product. People can put their hands on it in a way that they can't do in a Facebook ad or in picture in an email. You can put a device in it, drop it in front of them, and show that it's protective.
Yeah, I'd say I agree, and I was in education for a few years, and now obviously am not anymore, but still involved. But I have been to a few of those shows, and yeah, it is nice to be able to pick up that product and be able to look at it, and you can feel the quality of the product versus taking the word of the website for it, or just to be able to actually touch it is absolutely beneficial. Now, do you guys do like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn? I mean, are you heavily involved with the advertising and getting your name out that way, or is it really just having the product and having the product essentially speak for itself?
We've recently, as far as social media goes, it's been virtually useless for us until pretty recently. We've started putting more content out on LinkedIn. And I think what we started doing is trying to be more fun. I think we tried to copy what everybody else was doing, and we realized that didn't really represent what our brand stood for and who we were trying to be. The brand's named NutKase for a reason. And so, we started doing a lot more funny drop test videos, in the pool drop test videos. We did a Happy Gilmore spin-off where one of our salespersons was holding a case and we were launching baseballs at him, and he was using the case to block. Just like in Happy Gilmore when he's doing batting practice and he's getting hit, and doing that sort of stuff, which has actually resonated really well. I think EdTech can have a reputation sometimes of being a little stodgy and a little, schools are still sending POs by fax and stuff. And so for us, being more fun and young and a little more out there has actually really resonated way more than we thought it would. We were worried some people might be annoyed by it, but people have been loving it. We did a drop test video about a year and a half ago where we were throwing an iPad off a balcony, and I was standing down the bottom trying to catch it as cars are kind of driving past, and all sorts of stuff like that, just to make it a bit more interesting than, hi, this is Leo, here's our case, and call me now if you want to buy type content.
Yeah, I think I actually saw one of a recent video from you guys where you were doing like a HP device, dropped it off a balcony.
Way too high. Well, I couldn't even watch it. It was these guys going nuts with it. So yeah.
So I guess that's a question I had, since you mentioned that it's named NutKase for a reason. What was the inspiration behind the name?
The inspiration was quite random. I think ultimately I named it had like a fun name, but when I tell people I named it after myself, because I'm definitely a nutcase, and he chose NutKase with a K because he was taken. There's not much more to it than that. Yeah, we've seen, the name's memorable. People seem to have a laugh whenever they hear it, and that's kind of what makes it stand out a little bit too. Nice.
And I think that aspect of having fun, even making videos just to post, or having a fun name or something, I think actually goes a long way with people in really any industry. Just because, especially now with the past 2 or so years that we've gone through, people want to laugh, right? They want to have that happy feeling back. And it is, I scroll through Instagram all day watching stupid videos because they make me laugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a very good point. And I think we've also adjusted a bit of how our sales team likes to sell products, and really tried to push them to not feel that they have to be overly formal, that they can still be professional, of course, but take some more risks with things like that. We've definitely sent some email campaigns that were more meme focused, some of which worked really well, some of which were hated, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So we definitely tried to put content out there that makes us smile and we think would work for us.
Yeah, definitely. And in the same sense, kind of like you were saying, with entrepreneurship and just anyone in general, you truly won't get anywhere unless you make mistakes. I mean, that's just how it is. So for anyone that's interested in starting a business or anything, like, be ready to fail, because you're probably going to, at least in some regard. You're going to have a lot of hiccups along the way, and it's very important to overcome those and persevere through. I feel like that's something obviously you guys did with the toothpaste story. That was a huge issue to start, and obviously you persevered through it. And NutKase is pretty well known nowadays, I would say. So.
Also, being able to deal with rejection, I think people don't talk enough about. It's very easy to read about the Zuckerbergs of the world and from 1 to a billion and things like that. So many people are going to say no. So many people aren't going to want what you're selling. So many people aren't going to want to help. And you have to be pretty resilient and confident and back yourself to be able to, just like in sales, you get used to saying no, but entrepreneurship, for investors, people are not going to like your product idea. They're not going to like your idea in general. And being resilient enough to kind of push through that and stay confident and have a great mentality, I think, is really important.
So speaking of resilience and moving forward and still going with everything, Leo, Oliver, what is next for NutKase or another venture, or what do you guys have going on in the near future here?
You got a lot cooking. I don't know how much you want to disclose just yet until we have a little bit more. It's a little more bait. You got a lot of balls in the air, but yeah, I think higher level, we're exploring manufacturing options outside of China. We are building new product categories, and we're really excited about continuing to build on the momentum that we've been working our behinds off on building. And I think with the team that we have, we are really just still at the beginning of what can really happen. I think it's still just in the early stages still of the growth that we can achieve. So yeah, got a lot of exciting things in the pipe that you guys will hear about.
I think what's cool as well is just, our company's got 16 people in it now. And so seeing it sort of go from 1 person in the US in 2018 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 12, and sort of being a part of that growth and really seeing the team expand and finding other like-minded individuals that believe in the vision, believe in our company culture and kind of what we're trying to do here is, we're really excited for the growth. We want to be the best case company in K12. And that's kind of what drives us at the moment. And we think right now there's no reason why we can't be. It's just a matter of time and execution and just continually getting the things right over time, and the success will come.
So we're staying away from scooters and importing wine, or are we going to try to go back and hit those ventures again?
I still import a lot of wine. The mistake is trying to resell it. I'm more in the sort of end-to-end where it ends when I get the wine and I drink it. But I think Oliver still rides a scooter quite a bit. So it's the great thing about K12 right now is that COVID, despite all the terrible things that have happened, it's forced the industry to sort of speed up 10 years in the past 2 years. And so there's so much more potential. There's so much more budget going around. There's so many more opportunities in the space that I know we have tons of other ideas for supplementary products or extra things we can add to our portfolio. And the biggest challenge is just focus, like we talked about earlier, and knowing which are good to go for and which is, Leo's new take on the backpack. Do we ignore or do we do? Or which colors to change, what new strategies, what new materials. But there's so much room for growth in the space right now. It's a really exciting time to be in tech.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like you said, it's really forced this industry and just forced schools in general to, we've talked on previous episodes of our podcast with tech directors. A lot of schools weren't one-to-one before COVID, and then COVID kind of forced all of them to become one-to-one because they just couldn't teach at home or do e-learning days without a Chromebook or an iPad. So that's really made this the education technology market just rapidly explode, and just
Well,
what's
so
all
cool.
available out there. So.
Because they actually did it as well. I mean, we talked to so many districts. They had a 6-year technology plan, and that was going to get them, and that's how much time they needed. And COVID forced them to act, and a lot of them had great success. And I think a lot of the tech directors as well might be surprised with what would have seemed impossible pre-COVID to actually manage to pull off what they did, with relative amounts of success, barring, problems with supplies. But yeah, almost everyone we talk to now is one-to-one, and it's going great and doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
Yeah, very excited to see what the future holds. I mean, obviously, the technology is not going to go back in time. It's only going to continue evolving to be more complex and more user-friendly and more fragile, to be honest. But I do think, it is an industry that is sort of on the brink of, I would say, like a technology revolution or explosion, to where because we're never going back, right? I mean, you just can't go back and back to the way it used to be, which is fine. If I was a kid in school, I wouldn't want to carry around 30 books anymore either. But having that, essentially the world at your fingertips, protecting that world at your fingertips is definitely important. So yeah, I mean, very exciting to see where things go. Time will tell. But I think you guys have done something great. You started with an idea back in high school and turned it into a global company, which is amazing. And I hope, if you have any last bit of advice for anyone out there that's got the smallest idea, if you want to share it now.
Don't give up.
Yeah, right.
Keep trying.
Yeah.
Keep trying.
And
keep trying. That's really what it is. I mean, I think that's, you don't have to be the smartest person. You don't have to be, you don't have to have any real credentials or background or experience. It helps to have background, experience, and some level of education and credentials, but it's not necessary. And I really am just a huge believer in just meeting and you have that passion for a project and you have a burning desire to see it come to life. If you put in enough hours and you put in enough time and effort, it will happen one way or another. But on the flip side, you also have to be smart enough to kind of realize when it's time to move on to the project too. And that's also a pretty important lesson that kind of comes with experience. But, that's really, that's what I'd like to end off saying.
Yeah, and just a quick final note as well. We're going to be at the ISTE trade show in a couple of weeks. So if anyone has any entrepreneurial ideas or wants to come have a banter, or we're happy to talk about what's worked for us and give advice here and there. We'll be at booth 2748. We'll also be showing our cases, but it's more fun to talk about entrepreneurial crazy ideas.
Awesome, guys. Well, I wish you nothing but the best. Leo, Oliver, I appreciate you joining us today. Continued success, hopefully, as well. And I'm sure we'll see you guys at some shows coming down the road at some point.
Likewise.
Absolutely.
Thanks
so much.
Have a good one.